All right, I think we can get started now. Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is co-organized by the Market Advisory Council, the North Sea Advisory Council, and the Northwestern Waters Advisory Council. I'd like to inform everybody that there is interpretation in English, Spanish, and French. So if you please take the time to look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a globe symbol. You can click that and select the language that you'd like to listen on. I'd like to take a second to present myself as the moderator. My name is Philip Hegland. I'm a senior traceability expert and senior full stack software engineer at the Institute of Food Technologists. I work in the seafood traceability industry, and I have a deep understanding of software development, traceability systems, and traceability standards. I co-led the writing of the GDST technical standard, and I participated on the EPCIS 2.0 working group. I've also co-designed and developed a traceability platform for the seafood industry. I continue working to help enable traceability and interoperability in the seafood industry. I would also like to inform everybody that the webinar is being recorded. A report will be prepared. Presentations and videos will be made available at a later stage. During the webinar, please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. When submitting your questions, please make sure to identify your organization and whether you're a member of the advisory councils. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Ken Scow-Fisher for the opening message. Ken is the chair of the executive committee of the North Sea Advisory Council. He is also CEO of the Danish Fishers Producers Organization. He chairs several positions at national level, including the Danish Organization for the Promotion of Fish Products in Denmark. Go ahead, Kid.
Thank you, and thank you, Philip. I think you have a tough task in front of you, and we all look forward to this meeting. Now, dear participants, dear advisory council members, dear speakers and experts, dear stakeholders and other observers, it is certainly an honor for me, being the chair of the North Sea Advisory Council, to open this important webinar here today. And I'm quite astonished to see that we are more than 170 participants, or should be. And so at least I'm not the one who's really curious about what is the possibilities regarding blockchain in relation to the fisheries world. This webinar is aiming to explore applicability of emerging technology known under the buzzword blockchain. And there's a digital revolution ongoing with mobile technologies, smart technologies, drones, remote sensing, distributed computing, blockchain, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. Never more than now, and nowhere more than here has this revolution seemed more crucial. Disrupted supply chains hits fishermen and aquaculture farmers very hard, and we cannot, of course, forget the processors, wholesalers, and retailers. Fish products require systems that are seamless, efficient, and effective. Consumers demand systems that are reliable, fair, and transparent. We need food that is sustainable. This webinar, with its prominent speakers, academics, policymakers, technology experts, and perhaps most importantly, users, will try to shed the light of the benefits and challenges of this and other seafood traceability tools. We will look through the lens of European policy. Ongoing revision of control regulation introduces provision to ensure electronically recorded traceability information, supported by the farm to fork strategy, highlighting the new regulations' contributions to the fight against fraud through an traceability system. Besides traceability information, blockchain can also be a tool for transmission of other data along the chain with specific purposes such as fisheries control, fight against food fraud, product labeling, information to consumers, voluntary sustainability claims, and certification schemes. Primary producers, both fishers and aquaculture farmers, are the first and crucial link in the seafood value chain. It is important that input data reflects as much as possible the reality on board and on the farm, and that the data is securely stored and managed. This offers a potential way for our fishermen and aquaculture farmers to prove compliance. It is therefore our will and perhaps also duty to investigate it with an objective stance and open mind. I thank our speakers for assisting us here today in this task by providing state-of-the-art knowledge, expertise, and first-hand experience. I thank you all for attending, and I hope we will all leave this virtual space with new insights and ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. I couldn't agree more. Next up, I'd like to introduce Nada Bogos. She has a presentation about FAO's work on blockchain and fish value chains. Nada is a senior fish value chain expert in the FAO's Fisheries and Aquaculture Division. She works on post-harvest issues, eco-labeling, certification, and traceability.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. Thanks a lot, Philip, for the presentation. I'll share my screen. Yeah, so you see the main screen there, I hope. Yes. So before I begin, I would like to thank the organizers for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure for us to be here, and this is not the first event that FAO, particularly the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division, joins MAX events. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll try to be brief, presenting this document on blockchain applications in seafood value chains that was published last year. So blockchain technology, as it was mentioned earlier, can potentially be used to enhance traceability and transparency of agri-food value chains, and specifically seafood value chains, and contribute to social environmental sustainability of food systems. It is important to further explore the capacity of such digital tools now that we're in the midst of a new digital era of innovation, that these tools are explored to improve livelihoods, working conditions for security, transparency, traceability, as I just mentioned, for farmers and small-scale producers. And this will ultimately aim at stopping the paradox of small-scale holders, farmers or fishermen, being the most at risk of hunger and malnutrition, this being the core function or mandates of FAO. So we started looking at blockchain in seafood value chains only recently being last year. And what we wanted to do through this publication is try and demystify blockchain technology. There was many studies and applications in finance, in global trade, but particularly in seafood value chains, there were little. So we did that in order to demystify the technology and provide thoughts on the opportunities and challenges in order to implement it, having in mind small producers and developing countries. So to achieve this aim, there are 5 objectives there. One is to provide a review of blockchain technology and general applications in food production systems. And then second, to review digital tools and technology adoptions in seafood value chains in particular, and the review and analyze applications and opportunities in fisheries and aquaculture. And one of the most important objectives is to present public policy and trade implications in the application of such technology, and then lastly to provide policy recommendations for governments and other stakeholders along the value chain. So we looked at 7 studies through a commonality analysis, and there were mainly 5 similarities across these. The first is that most of the projects had relatively short and clearly defined or vertically integrated value chains where the actors were known, which is an important feature to have when wanting to apply blockchain, particularly in fisheries and seafood, where the supply chain is more of a system than it being a clearly defined value chain with the numerous stakeholders and actors. The second is that the project focused mainly on high-value commodities such as tuna and toothfish, Patagonian toothfish. The third, all projects rely on some way to link the physical with the digital, which is one of the things that is more of a challenge, the transition between the digital and the physical, and the link that could be a weak link there where more emphasis and work should be put in. And there were the immutability of data and secure data sharing were the most common reasons for utilizing blockchain technology across the studied 3 projects. And finally, the use of QR codes on product packaging was the method that was most favored, possibly because of its utility. Challenges. There are 4 overarching challenges that were identified. One, as I was referring to earlier, is the complex seafood value chain scenarios are, I would say, until the end of last year and the beginning of this year, are still untested, and solutions to the complexities in the seafood value chain is something that we still need to look at. The second, that physical fish tagging or labeling could be lost or damaged while transporting the fish, and that could be potentially tampered with. The third is that most of the projects rely on human inputs of fish data, which themselves could be open to tampering. Finally, verifiability of private and consortium blockchain platform. By their nature, these types of blockchains are not open to the public, and transactions on them cannot be independently verified. The main recommendations, they come into under 2 items, I would say. First is the 4 critical forethoughts needs to be given to traceability in general along the value chain before we start considering blockchain as an application or a tool for traceability in seafood value chains. The first is that there needs to be an exhaustive understanding of all possible supply chain scenarios, events, and scenarios under consideration so that traceability can be sustained. The second, there needs to be a clear definition of critical tracking events and key data elements that need to be covered in traceability. Here, I'll give just an example. Maybe most of you are familiar with the critical tracking events, which are the points in a supply chain where data needs to be recorded, and the key data elements are the elements corresponding to those CTEs that need to be recorded. So here, just an example for Port State. We have been working extensively on traceability in my team, and we looked at the definition or minimum requirements with regards CTEs and KZEs as the backbones really from a technical point of view to improving traceability in seafood, in aquaculture and capture fisheries. The third is for regulatory purposes. The segments of the analysis need to consider the administrative, logistic, and legal aspects associated with each type of states having custody of fishery products. We know that there are many types of states with the various responsibilities, and those administrative and legal aspects with regards to traceability need to be looked at in the right framework. And then finally is that there needs to be a clear understanding of the current operational and logistic limitations of existing traceability systems, and whether an improvement to blockchain or to something else, non-blockchain, is necessary, and what are the benefits and the incentives for that. The second item is to look at whether blockchain is the appropriate tool for traceability, and there are two critical forethoughts that needs to be looked at. First is to use a well-designed decision tree or other decision models that determine whether blockchain is the right tool or a database is better suited. And there are many examples of decision trees. This is just one example that is featured in the publication. And then the second and final is, if blockchain is chosen as the appropriate tool, then attention still needs to be given to operational considerations, security considerations, electronic data interchange, regulatory uncertainty, increased responsibility of the users, being the main topics or issues under this item. I think it will be my last slide, just some general comments having to do more about technology and more, and some of them highlighting the need to not overhype blockchain, but be mindful of the existing systems and whether it is chosen as the most appropriate tool, that it compares enough from a financial, legal, technology aspect to another option. So in summary, I would say technology applications should be fit to the right scenarios, where a technology's choice, for instance, distributed ledgers as blockchain, is to follow strict due diligence at legal, commercial, and operational levels prior to commitments, when value and practicality compared to simpler options are demonstrated. And the concern, as I implied, is one of the digital divides that organizations such as FAO tries to bridge and not exacerbate when dealing with stakeholders from different regions, bearing in mind the digital divides and what developing countries or small producers might encounter as challenges more as compared to developed or larger scale operations or production systems. And that's it. This is the link to the publication, and thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you very much, Nada. That was a very interesting presentation. Next up, thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce Nina Dokizou. She has a presentation about the priorities on blockchain technology of the Slovenian presidency of the Council of the European Union. Nina is head of a project group on the new economy and blockchain technologies in the Slovenian Ministry of Economic Development and Technology. She is a member of the OECD's Blockchain Expert Policy Advisory Board and vice chair of the Advisory Group for Advanced Technologies at UNECE.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation. And I would like here to Thank you for inviting me to this webinar, because I think it's very useful, and thank you for the presentation that was before me. I think also the study is very useful and can be used also for our use cases that we are developing on the European level, but also we will develop something like this in the national level. So if I start, for example, I'm sure that I will take into consideration more policy thinking, or more policy considerations, and then we can probably talk about how to integrate those approaches together, because this topic, what you are having, is quite interesting also for the horizontal issue. I think that we can summarize and put it on the higher level some very useful findings that you mentioned in the study that was done. But if I go step by step, you know that we started in 2018 with the establishment of Blockchain Observatory and Forum. This is a kind of think tank on the European level where a lot of critical and key knowledge is accumulated in different areas of, for example, different industrial verticals, different horizontal verticals, and they are launching, mapping the ecosystem and launching the reports. And that reports are very interesting, so I suggest you to go through, and you will find a lot of useful things. After that, in 2018, the declaration was signed by 33 ministries on establishment of European blockchain partnership. This is the unique partnership on the European level, because this is a combination of cooperation between European Commission and member states. And every member state which is participating country nominates its official representatives from the government, and then also nominates them some kind of experts for technical development of use cases and for technical development of the infrastructure. If I go on, this EBP, so European Blockchain Partnership Policy Group, where I'm representative, we have co-chairing system. Maybe I will touch it later. But just for to give you an impression, we are divided then into policy group with the representatives of member states, technical group with the experts, and 3 working groups for self-sovereign identity, notarization, authentication. And here we just changed the name of that use case, and it is now traceability use case. So we can maybe find some parallels or some common issues here within your project, and the 1 working group of diplomas. So just to have, for example, the feeling, we defined also relations with foreign countries, with organizations, and with other EC directorates. So here I also see the chance or the opportunity for cooperation also with your project and with your initiative. In 2019, we adopted a mission statement. So we defined what will be that EBP focus: sharing experiences, best practices, close cooperation of policy and regulatory cooperation, promoting interoperability, then creation of new use cases, and what was the most important, that we agreed to have co-chair systems. So the member states that are co-chairs, or trio of the member states that are co-chairs of that are in the presidency trio of European Union, then take over the presidency 1.5 years of that trio to be covered. And at that
Nina,
time,
I'd like to interrupt you just 1 second. We can just see the title slide.
The title slide?
Yes, I apologize. But
Oh, I'm sorry, but I will go out. So you didn't see those slides? That one?
no, we did not. We are seeing your screen with the PowerPoint right now.
I'm sorry, that one. So the structure was here, and I explained the structure also here. Within this one, you can share my presentation also with all the spectators that we have today here. And then I moved to the mission statement of European Blockchain Partnership. And now I was thinking to explain a little bit what are we focusing on at the moment. As we know, Digital Europe program was adopted. We also managed to approve that recovery and resilience program. We are preparing blockchain strategy within European Blockchain Partnership, and we are upgrading European blockchain services infrastructure. What is here important to say that there are at least two things where we can work more focused in interoperability and in traceability. This is first, it is called European Early Adopters Program, where we have use cases which adopt blockchain and EPSI like infrastructure in early stage of the development. Then we have a kind of competence centers that knowledge can be also shared, disseminated, collected, and accumulated, and then used for specific types of use cases. The presidency priorities were the following. First, the strengthening of the role of European Blockchain Partnership, then the role of blockchain technology and the European blockchain digital landscape, then the further development of European blockchain services infrastructure, strengthening of knowledge, skills, and so on, and identification of early adopters use case in the field of traceability, notarization skills, energy efficiency, smart cities, and communities. At the same time, we also foreseen the activities in the European blockchain services infrastructure regarding our National Recovery and Resilience Fund. And here we are connecting further development of European blockchain services infrastructure with the use cases that will be developed also on the national level. So in the interest of time, I will just show how this is structured. For example, EPSI is public permission blockchain infrastructure. The nodes are set on the member state level, but they can be set also on the organizational level, also on cross-border extra Europe position. Then we have public access to public data. We guarantee cross-border interoperability, and we have actually three-layer architecture. This is infrastructure, a layer, a service layer, and business application layer. You can see here how complicated structure it is. But earlier when we were listening to the study, if blockchain is the right technology or not, it cannot be used for example, it can be used in some cases, but for all the cases, we cannot define that blockchain has to be used as appropriate technology. But on the other hand, we can combine this technology with other functionalities of other technologies. And we are talking a lot about blockchain and AI combination, because we know that as a blockchain is a data-based protocol that is storing the data and enables peer-to-peer communication. AI is, for example, the one that is collecting data, structuring the data, and give us an appropriate information to create the block in that chain of blocks which are constituting blockchain. So if we are in doubts if blockchain is appropriate technology, we can analyze this from 2 points of view. One point of view is definitely that it can be not appropriate for every use case worldwide. On the other hand, if it is used for industrial deployment, for example, in the combination with other technologies, it is very valuable and very useful to be used.
Nina,
for example,
we're at the 11-minute mark, so we're about
less
a minute
than minute.
past.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would just like to emphasize why is this beneficial for public sector, for example, in terms of digital knowledge and skills, reducing administrative barriers, cross-border barriers, strengthening the attractiveness of EU and national economies, and legal settlements for better stability and predictability. What I think, and this is the last thought, this is the picture from our first meetup. There were 350 people, and this was 2017 when we started with blockchain. What is important here to see how blockchain can be integrated into the traceability of seafood supply chain. It is a very useful technology for this. And it can be also further developed within the use case that we are having or developing within European Blockchain Partnership. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I was a little bit too long.
Thank you. Sorry you had some technical difficulties, but the European blockchain sounds incredibly interesting. I definitely want to read more about that.
Okay.
Thank you for speaking. Thank you for your presentation. Unfortunately, we do not, we were scheduled to have somebody from the European Commission speak, but unfortunately the European Commission did not have availability to present at today's webinar due to the ongoing revision of the EU Fisheries Control Regulation, and the Fisheries Control Unit of DG Mare they are currently extremely busy. So without that presentation, I'd like to move us into a moderately short Q&A session. So we have Q&A for the next 10 minutes. If anybody could present, or if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom meeting, and I'll make sure to address your questions. If there are no questions, I would like to put forward a question on the FAO's work on the blockchain study, and any of the studies that y'all looked at, or any of the case studies, was there any interoperability that occurred?
If this is the question for me, there are the case studies for interoperability, and when I saw the focus of the study, I thought about 1 hour project, which is called UNC Fact Chain. Within this, we analyzed the 3 types of interoperability. We analyzed within that cross-border infrastructure, we analyzed the legal governance and technical interoperability, and we analyzed what are the challenges and what are the solutions. And within the challenges, and actually we analyzed the one of the energy efficiency or agri-food traceability use case. And here we found out that we have a challenge of, for example, the recognition of the data cross-border, of the recognition or the setting of the standards for acceptability of the data, which is not more or less the case within the European Union, because we have the regulatory base that is the same for all the countries, but it is more challenge for extra EU and the trade and communication for extra EU. So the standards, the non-equal treatment of the data and the accessibility of the data was one of the main challenge for example, for traceability of agriculture, and it can be very similar to seafood supply chain. The second thing for interoperability, for that legal part, we found out that we have some general law, but then we have some industry-specific law, and then for example, the competition law, it can come into a conflict when we make the measures for certain type of industries and the accessibility of the data within the clusters. It can be also the challenge. We heard earlier about, for example, the challenge of that customers are not known. We can have public blockchain or public that public part of the wallet within which we can define who is or who can enter the chain here, and who identifies with which identifier. And this is very much in connection with digital identity or self-sovereign identity, which we are taking into consideration now when we are redefining eIDAS regulation. So verification of the authentication of the person at the end of the chain needs to be ensured, definitely. How we can approach to this? There are different kinds of that approach, but one is that we provide that KYC, okay, and the other is the automatic verification through smart contracts, for example, where the descriptors need to be very well defined in advance. So here within the smart contracts, we are in any case still missing some clarifications, but within the definition of the right standards, I'm sure that also interoperability between different regions and between different sectors will be ensured in a very short time.
Thank you.
I would share with you, but I don't find, yeah.
I have one more question from an anonymous attendee, and I think this is directed at you, Nina. Is the EU presidency focusing on blockchain as the only tool for traceability, or are there other tools being analyzed?
Yeah, we can have another other tools. Okay, we have internet, which we can use for following the documents. But if you ask me, maybe not the only tool, but the tool that is enabling traceability, because it is enabling the subscription of the documents one by one. So it is building the blocks on the basis of the information what we get from different sources. And why it is the best tool, maybe not the only, but the best tool for traceability, is because of the characteristics of the technology that we have. So the functions of different technologies are different. We can use quantum computing for computing the large amounts of the data, but that data is put on or can be put on the cloud, and we need to come somehow to that data. So also here, blockchain can support the traceability of the data in the real time very, very good. And this is why we analyze this in depth, so that we can show what are the benefits of this technology to ensure traceability. Maybe not the only one, the only technology, but the one that is best supporting traceability of all the things that we want to trace along the value chain.
Yes, Nada, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Philip, and thanks a lot, Nina. You practically replied to the questions. Thank you. Now, I would like to reiterate exactly what Nina said about first the regulatory aspects. that were also analyzed in the publication that I presented earlier, and that are in fact one of the major challenges there. And then underlying is the interoperability one, plus the potential failures of blockchain together could be 1, 2 in terms of priority as far as we discussed. So in terms of interoperability, I mentioned earlier for traceability first. Yes, okay, blockchain, another tool can help it, but not solve the problems. And one of the things that, one of the aspects or the areas of work that we've been dedicating some time to, as I mentioned earlier, is to have a more or less common agreement on the value chain steps that are considered critical, the CTEs, and what are the data that are needed at that stage. So technical, but not really technical, because it doesn't touch on the IT parts, and I'm not an expert on that. But once the minimum requirements are there in under these 2 aspects, that contributes a lot in setting up the basis for interoperability. And I'll stop there. Thanks a lot again, Philip and Nina.
Thank you all so much for your responses and your presentations. We actually just had one more question come in, so let's see here. So we have a question about what about permanently storing data versus meaningful duration of data in agri-food? For example, for a fish, from catching and eating the fish, 2 years, 5 years, max 10 years. But with blockchains, the data is stored forever. So has anybody thought about cleaning up old data, or will data always be stored forever?
It depends what kind of data this is, because if we need the data for analysis, then historical values are very important. If we need the data just for verification and for security and safety reasons, then when the situation ends, probably the data can be used for another purpose, for example, because through blockchain, we access to that data in the real time. And this data can be used in multi-use way. So this is also the efficiency use of the data and the efficiency use of data as source. I don't think that, or maybe the question should be opposite. How we manage that data to be multiply used in different situations that can serve and that can support certain actions to verify, to authenticate, and to confirm that the thing is real, the thing that we are confirming and having, and this is from the original up to the last stage of the data in the block. We can rely on that data because it can assure that it's regular, it's proper, and it can be verified. This would be my question to this.
Thank you, Nina.
Answer. Yeah.
We have time for one last question. Is blockchain seen by the European Union as a means of gathering and storing data, or a tool to help the buyer of the products follow the process along the chain to ensure this fish is sustainable and ensures trust and the product information?
It's again for me. I think for both. Because we have a kind of infrastructure. It is for sharing, securing, and tracing the data. Okay, but on the other hand, we have use cases like that fisheries and food supply chain and seafood supply chain, that is also for the other part of the question. So we go in the both directions, not only one, not only storage of the data and that manipulation of the data, but also coverage of whole value chain of the certain industrial sector. Here we can apply in the seafood value chain sector.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your questions. So at this point, I'd like to move on to some more presentations. The next speaker that we have, I'd like to introduce Peter Olsen. He has a presentation about whether seafood traceability systems should be based on blockchain technology. Peter is a senior scientist with NOFIMA, the Norwegian Food Research Institute. He works with applications of information and communication technology in the food industry.
Hello, just a second here. Thank you for the opportunity to present here. So let me just share here. I'm sorry, let's see if, I'm not sure if sharing is enabled here. Just a second, sharing doesn't seem to be enabled here. I'm trying to fix that. Can you hear me, anyone? No?
Yes, I can hear you.
We do hear you loud.
Okay.
But we just see your webcam. We do not see your presentation.
No, my presentation. As I said, I really need to.
Should we?
Wait. I mean, I've been listening to the conversation, and I've had a sharing window up all the time, and I'm an IT person, so I should know this. So I only get the Zoom.
Do you see the little green button at the bottom bar?
No, I mean, I've lost the entire Zoom window. That's the thing. It just says talking Peter Olsen, and
you may need to expand
fine.
it.
Share screen. Now we're getting somewhere. And I apologize for this. And we go back and share screen. And fine. No, you see screen 1 now. You should see screen 2.
There we
go.
You
can see your presentation now.
Yeah, this is hopefully better. Thank you. Yes, thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation. It's interesting to listen to the discussions we've had before. I think, and this is also based on literature and reports and trade journals and so on, there is some confusion between the advantages offered by a digital traceability system and the specific advantages or characteristics of one based on blockchain technology. And I'll try to clear up some of this hopefully in a short presentation. I'm from NOFIMA. I'm not going to say a lot about that. It's the Norwegian Food Research Institute, and we've been working with blockchain quite a lot. We have a number of international projects, including some on regional, national, and some EU projects. And we made some reports from this. And what I'm going to show you is basically some of the conclusions from some of the reports. I'll also link to them. So we've discussed traceability a lot, and that is probably the most natural application of blockchain in the seafood industry. But I should perhaps mention there are, of course, other things you can use blockchain for in the seafood sector. You could use it for preventing reuse of certificates, for smart contracts, for ERP systems, and so on. But I will focus on traceability systems because that's what we have worked most with when it comes to implementation. So what I'll do in this presentation is I'll very briefly go through the components of a traceability system and the attributes of blockchain technology and see how they fit. So basically, we can say that the traceability system has three components. It's necessary in a traceability system to identify the traceable resource units, the units that you're tracing, whatever they are in your system. You also need some way of documenting the transformations, how inputs become outputs, and what happens in the chain. And then finally, you need to document the attributes, the thing you're tracing, the weight and the species and the amount and the dates of processing and the temperature and so on. So on a very overall level, these are the three things you need to do in a traceability system. And practically all traceability systems, like when we do supply chain mapping and analysis and look at traceability system, we look at these three components. So we'll get back to these and see how well blockchain fits to each of those. Which brings us to blockchain. There is quite a lot of blockchain buzz in the seafood industry, some during the last months and years and so on. And without doing a blockchain lecture, I'm sure most of you know that blockchain started in, well, we had a bank crisis in September 2008, and the initial specification came 1 month later. And it was basically as a specification of a peer-to-peer system, a system that didn't need an authority to verify the data was on it. The initial application, as I'm sure you know, of Bitcoin, that's not what we're going to talk about today, but it turns out that this system is very well suited also for some other purposes, and in particular a traceability system. One challenge is that there has been sort of a euphoria and publicity around this, and these are direct quotes from some trade news articles. For instance, on adulteration with blockchain, tampered products can be easily identified and isolated, prevented expensive product recalls. That sounds good. And Walmart reported it took 2.2 seconds to trace mangoes when they use blockchain. Without blockchain, this would have taken 6 days and 18 hours. There's a problem with this. It's complete and utter bullshit. It has nothing to do with blockchain whatsoever. And this is a recurring theme that a lot of the advantages people are discussing, they're really comparing an old or bad or even manual traceability system with a digital system, and then they think that the advantages of a digital systems are the advantages of a blockchain system. That's just not true. But there are some advantages, and let's look at what these are. Blockchain, I'm sure you know, is an incorruptible digital ledger of transactions, economic originally, but can be any. So typical blockchain in the original specification was the transaction from an account to an account. Without going into details a lot here, I think for those of you, there are more than 120 people at this meeting, and if you're not sure what blockchain is, if you're logged onto this webinar to learn about blockchain, I think a simple substitution you can do in your mind is whenever someone says blockchain, just substitute the word blockchain with database, because that's what blockchain is. It's just a way of storing and organizing data and access to data. It is a database that has some particular characteristics. It is in practice always online with many users. It is distributed with many copies. It is synchronized because you have all these copies and they need to be synchronized. And maybe most importantly, it's encrypted and it's immutable. And immutable means it cannot be changed. That is an interesting and valuable property compared to a normal database where you can change things. So this does not solve all the problems that was mentioned previously. In particular, we have to keep in mind that blockchain is a virtual online system. It lives in the cloud, it lives on the internet. Whereas the fish and food that we produce and consume is in the real physical world. And there is and will always be a weakness of getting accurate data into the blockchain. Blockchain does not solve the garbage in, garbage out problem. But there are some advantages once you've gotten the data into the system. So going back to our traceability overview, identification of the units. So can blockchain help with that? No. Identification of units that's out there in the real world. That is really the connection between the real world and the virtual world.
Peter, I'd just like to give you a heads up on 3 minutes for your time slot.
Yeah, sure. This is the second or third last slide. Attributes of the traceable resource units. It can help, but basically the way it still suffers from the attributes need not be correct. But what blockchain really excels at is documentation of transformations, because a normal database contains sort of state values or claims, whereas inherently a blockchain system is made to document transactions, which is the same as transformations. So in summary, it's an exciting technology that has the potential to underlie a major technological paradigm shift. Solution providers are currently overselling the benefits of systems based on blockchain technology. If it's confidentiality and speed you want, you wouldn't go to blockchain because of the redundancy in a blockchain system. It is much slower, I mean, than a system. But that might be that might mean it takes 0.01 seconds rather than 0.001 seconds. So that might not be an issue. But Visa, for instance, has rejected blockchain because it's too slow for them. For traceability in the supply chain, blockchain can remedy some of potential problems because while the claims in the system might still be wrong, in a blockchain system, you know 2 important things. You know who made these claims, and you know these claims, these values have not been tampered with. So for more information about that, there is an NOFIMA report freely available that we made 2 years ago. And in fact, we're making an updated version now for seafood only that will be available in some months. And for those of you in the northern regions, I would also invite you. We actually have a blockchain in the Arctic seafood industry workshop, a physical meeting in Tromsø next week. And some of those attending this meeting are going to be present. But if you qualify and if you're in one of the northerly regions of Europe, you're welcome to join us in Tromsø next week. And I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was a very interesting presentation. Can't wait to read the report once y'all update it. Our next speaker is W. Nikolaus Probst. He has a presentation about increasing trust and transparency in fisheries with emerging data technologies. Nikolaus is a senior scientist at the Thunen Institute of Sea Fisheries. He is a fisheries biologist and works on the implementation of fisheries and conservation policies.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, thank you for inviting me and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present some of the results or some of the ideas that were sketched in a review paper that I wrote about 2 years ago. So you might find some examples that are quite outdated or not up to date. There's probably a lot of new stuff going on because this field is so evolving so quickly. But I hope it still gives you some sort of idea how blockchains and data technologies that are emerging currently could still be useful. So I try to share my screen now. I hope you can see the right one. Can you understand me all right?
Yes, we can see your screen and we can understand you clearly.
Okay, and I hope you see also the screen that is like the main, the full screen window, not the presenter's view.
Yes, we can. We can see
Okay.
the full screen presentation.
All right, great. So yeah, thank you. So the title is Increasing Trust and Transparency in Fisheries with Emerging Data Technologies. And I want to thank Peter at this occasion because maybe my talk is a little bit, or it's very optimistic probably, but of course, due to the limited time frame, it's I didn't like put any caveats or problems in this in this talk that are of course encountered with these kind of new technologies. And the examples I present are probably a little bit superficial, and each of them would require a lot of extra thinking and a lot of extra effort to get them really implemented. But this is supposed to be like a sketch of ideas, basically. And it's written, or it's presented from very much from a consumer's and also a little bit from a scientific perspective or a fisheries biologist perspective, where we have to deal with data and it's not easy to get it sometimes. Well, the basic idea or how I came across this idea of blockchain was this digital innovation that is occurring. It's like occurring so fast and rapidly. This cartoon by a Chinese newspaper shows that it becomes part of our bodies almost. We produce data and with our smartphones, with our computers, with all kinds of things. This data is connected. Everything is connected to the internet more or less. And because this connected data can be stored, processed and analyzed, it can be converted also to new products and services. So why shouldn't excuse me?
No, for a second there you had a connection issue, but please continue. I'm not sure if the issue is on my end or if
it is not on your end, unfortunately.
Okay.
It looks like we've lost the speaker. Yep.
I think we've lost the speaker. Well, why don't we move on to Frank Fleming?
Excuse me, I hope I'm back.
Oh, never mind.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay,
we lost you for a second there.
I'm sorry. Yeah, of course, during my presentation, my connection breaks down. That happens. Okay, sorry for that. So it's just the second slide of my talk, and it's so you haven't missed anything. So from a consumer's perspective, we are confronted with this kind of nice meal, but we have some questions around it.
We cannot see your screen if you're sharing.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry. And so I have to share the screen again once more. Okay. Can you see it now?
We can see your screen now.
Okay.
And you're
thanks.
clear.
Okay. Okay, from a consumer's perspective, we have this nice meal of seafood in front of us, but we have some questions associated with it following the media. Basically, where does this actually come from? What is it? What kind of species? How was this caught? How was it produced? Who made this? And on a second level, we have this kind of deeper questions around it. Hopefully, this is not was not produced like with too high bycatches, or did the workers have good working conditions producing this? Or hopefully no habitat was destroyed. So we have these kind of concerns because often, especially in seafood, many countries import a lot of seafood, and the supply or value chains are not very clear and transparent. It's really hard to trace back what we are actually consuming in many circumstances. And the second thing is that fisheries is a very discrete, or not, it's like a global elusive enterprise. That's how I call it. Elusive because what happens at sea, and Peter also mentioned this before, happens at sea and it's hardly observed. So the fishermen or the fishing operators are by themselves. They can do what they they do pretty much the operation without any observation, except for some observe sea programs, which many countries have, but which have a very low coverage rate. There's also high numbers of bycatches of invertebrates or fish or other organisms that is not always recorded, or in most circumstances actually it's not recorded. And also it's a global enterprise, so it's occurring, you can see this here in this paper by Watson et al. From the 1950s to the 2000s. You can see how fisheries is expanding in the effort. What is shown here on the graphs is the redder the color, the higher the fishing effort is in that according grid cell. So you can see that the effort increased totally, but also spread wider across the globe. So fishing is intense, it's happening everywhere. We often do not really know exactly what is going on the vessel. So that is the questions that we also have from a consumer perspective, but also from a scientist or administrative perspective, that we do not really know how fisheries is operating. Another example about food traceability is here this EC code from the EU. I think it's EU-wide applied. And you can see that it's traceability is not only, and transparency is not only an issue for fisheries, but it's also for other food products. And here with this EC code, you can see that is an example that it is implemented some sort of like digitized and standardized traceability system, where you can see where the egg is coming from which country, how it was reared, and who produced this egg. So there's some sort of like first example of an approach, even though this is not related to blockchains, but it's related to data and data storage and big data, which is also part of this talk. So the three technologies I would like to highlight here a little bit are the blockchain. So, and this is a graph from the paper I was talking about in the introduction. It's basically, as Peter said, a database that is distributed not only on one server, but on many, and it's synchronized and updated, and it can store information. The second data technology I would like to, that's supposed to mean real-time automized data mining. It's not real-time atomized, so that's a spelling mistake, sorry for that. So it's the second technology is about like data mining and looking at big data and storing and processing big data in real time. And the third technology is artificial intelligence, which is a little bit linked with the second one, but I think there's a difference in the two, because artificial intelligence really looks for patterns that are not clearly visible or not easily detectable, but uses certain algorithms to do that. So here's like a simplified picture of the whole setup that we have here. We have like the fishing vessels, that we have a Coast Guard that is like legal enforcer. We have like the supply chain, a little bit simplified maybe. We have some sort of administration, and we have some interplay between these. And we heard quite a bit about, and we will hear more about what these new technologies can do, and to track the supply chain, for example, we can combine artificial intelligence and big data analysis together with a blockchain, maybe to follow the supply chain and eventually allow the consumer to really identify what kind of seafood he is getting from which region of the world, and what were the conditions, how the seafood was produced. But, and here's an example from the South Pacific tuna fishery I found when I was researching for this paper. And you can see here, maybe, even though it's tiny, it's a QR code that is like attached to this fish. And like Peter and Nena, I think, also mentioned before, it's not always, and yeah, you can imagine that this is like still susceptible to fraud or tampering. So that's like I think one of the very early examples of how this can be adopted. Another example maybe is also to identify catches, which is like a big issue for people like me working in the administration of fisheries, like management of fisheries, also like approaching it from the science side to get data on the status of the stock, but also on the intensity of fisheries. And
Nicholas, I'd just like to give you a 2-minute heads up.
Okay, 2 minutes. Okay, that's not a lot. Thank you. So I will finish this example. So big data or artificial intelligence can be used to identify what kind of elements are in the catch and how, and then can be processed and analyzed and transferred maybe to the management authorities who record this data and can process it further or proceed it further to the legal enforcer, who can then recheck and see if that what is recorded on board is also actually that what has been transmitted. So it's like a tool to identify catches. And I had 2 more examples, but I probably yeah, maybe this is the final one here. It's about trading quotas and catches, maybe similar to like real blockchain assets, or like assets that can be traded on blockchains, like it's done with cryptocurrencies. So administrative issues or fisheries management issues can issue this catches and quotas as assets to fishing agents, fishing operators, and they can buy those and retrade them amongst them, and then like report these tradings to the administration or to the port. Also, maybe they can like do these trades between different ports to get better prices for selling at different places. Okay, so there are a couple of more ideas. I encourage you, if you're interested in this, to look at the paper. I hope I can send you the reference in the chat, and I'm happy to take your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Nicolas. Yes, please do share the link to the report in the chat so that me and everybody else can take a look at that in deeper detail. Next, we have a presentation from Thomas Lavac. He has a presentation about decentralized trust in food supply chains. Thomas is a co-founder of the Trace Lab groups and of Origin Trail, the world's first decentralized knowledge graph.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hello.
See a lively debate already ongoing, so that's awesome. Am I okay to share my screen and kick it off, Philip?
Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
All right, cool. There we go. So Philip was kind enough to give you an overview. I'll be chatting about decentralized trust in food supply chains today. Realizing that this might start like a couples therapy, but trust is important, and we'll be looking at different components of how technology could be a facilitator in this process. And hopefully we come out on the other end, understanding a little bit about how we approach it, or how we see the future of really managing trust in supply chains, or even, especially within the food supply chains, might look like, and how different components or different technologies could play an important role in this process. So obviously the whole event today is about blockchain. So I just want to kind of go ahead and start this presentation with trying to explain how we observe blockchains. So blockchains, for us, really what they are trust networks. So they are a network that provides that integrity to data, to transactions, to some sort of trustless computing, and a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, really they bring a lot of trust in, or they bring that trust element to the table. They are a decentralized protocol, meaning there's no central authority, and that by its design, they provide a few kind of value propositions that are really cool. So you have a tamper-proof shared transaction ledger that you can leverage and use in many different ways. You can handle things like decentralized identities, which is important because in a world where kind of you're trying to design certain things that should work without a central authority, you got to rely on identities, and you got to rely on replicating social relations in a technical sense as well. So this is why identities are very cool about blockchain, very cool part about blockchain. And then you have these, new concepts that are up and coming, which sometimes to some people might seem scary, to some people might seem rebellious, to some people might seem a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, they're very powerful drivers for innovation to happen and for new models to start to appear. So kind of as we observe these trust networks here, we got to also observe certain tools that are being built on top of them as a tool. So we got to look at it as a tool for our particular use case. So in this case, food supply chain, how really we can use these different things, even though they might seem a little bit scary and unknown at the first time, such as decentralized finance, such as tokenizations and NFTs and metaverses and all these kind of terms that you might have come across, in especially, or you will come across in this Christmas period that's upcoming, where there's going to be families joining together, and then there's for sure someone's going to bring it up, and it's different concepts that can be powerful across the board, but we got to observe them kind of as tools, as things that we can use from our toolkit. So blockchains are pretty cool, but they are trust networks. There also are not a lot of things. So they're definitely not a silver bullet. You can't buy them by the kilo and just sprinkle them somewhere and all things will go magical from that point on. They are not a very performant database for supply chain use case, because they're restricted in terms of data handling by design. They should be, because it's something that is they hold. What they have is this so-called consensus across the entire network, so everyone remembers everything about the entire history, and it makes it really, really resilient, but it makes it really, really well, it's a lot of replication by design. It's aimed at really pushing you to publish as little data on such network as possible, which is not good for supply chains, because what we want to do is we want to have a lot of data. We want to have a lot of descriptions about what's going on. So obviously this is not a silver bullet. This is not something that will be on its own the thing that will solve all and everything, but it's a very good important factor when it comes to trust. So what we saw as a very, very important complement to the blockchain is a technology called knowledge graph. That's another technical term that we're introducing to make to make things worse, but it's an important thing. Knowledge graphs are a very, very interesting technology, which were used by Google, for example, to map out the World Wide Web, like all the websites, by Amazon to map out different relations between products, or Netflix to give you that cool recommendation. Hey, you should be looking this series after you binged, Squid Game. And then because it's like everywhere where you have connected and linked data appearing a lot of times, that's where knowledge graphs make sense. And obviously, when we're talking about food supply chains, we got a lot of connections, right? So I don't know how many, dozens of companies might be involved, or organizations or individuals over the course of an average food supply chain globally. I mean, we wanted it or not, there's some of them might be short, some of them are complex, but there's still a lot of stakeholders that play a part. And we gotta create the middleware or middle ground that will have that neutrality and integrity of a decentralized system, while we'll also have this type of approach to handling structured data, linked data, very performantly, so that we'll be able to have something that actually function, and not something that will just force everyone to change their systems. And that's kind of like what really knowledge graphs bring to the table. So what we've designed is a origin trail, which is world's first decentralized knowledge graph. So we've taken the knowledge graph technology, overlaid it over a decentralized network, and kind of joined together the benefits of both things for a pretty powerful thing. And basically what we're trying to, or what our main mission here is, that we're then taking any type of asset, and here asset is not used in that financial sense, but really widely. So define it as either a food supply chain product, or a digital asset, or a digital art, whatever. Any type of asset can be then made discoverable, verifiable, and valuable. So we can move from this, and that's an important part, especially for food supply chains a lot of times, and I'll be speaking a little bit to some of the use cases as well. But moving from physical to digital, obviously, being aware that some things might be pen and paper at this point, some things might be Excel files, but all of this should kind of be moved to some sort of a digital format. And once it is digital, we need to make sure that whatever we're proposing as a middleware is able to support a lot of these different things. And then as we create this data, we have to move it to assets, so things can start making sense also in terms of the economical value, and just break down silos left and right. So you don't want to create another system, another blockchain that's going to be permissioned and it's going to be locked down, and then this will have to again connect with something third, fourth, and fifth, and you're going to have another problem of just different types of an ERP. All right. So we've been around for a few years, and there's quite a few different use cases that have been built on top of Origin Trail, from handling over 40% of US imports, audit report data with Trusted Factory, Swiss Federal Railway is using it for increasing the rail travel safety. There's a pharmaceutical industry use case that's just dropping a little bit more details in the following weeks. But there's also food and beverage traceability, which is our team's kind of like a historically also closest industry and subject that's very near and dear to our heart. And there's quite a few interesting kind of use cases within the food and bev that I think we'll check out too today.
Tomas, I'd like to give you just a 2-minute heads up.
2-minute warning. Gotcha. No worries. I think we'll be there. So the first one that we're looking here is I think one of the largest poultry producers as a part of the group that they're in Europe, or at least in that part of the Europe. So Pertinap 2 using really this type of technology to build trust against their consumers. So kind of their provenance piece is really important to them. So it's really one use case that you'd be kind of looking for. And that's something that can be achieved with obviously with blockchain and origin trail in this sense as a decentralized knowledge graph. Just giving more information, trusted, verifiable information to different stakeholders. And the cool thing is that once you start to build this thing, you can create a scope of different use cases. So you can look at how can I reuse this data also for other use cases, either to share it with my partners in the supply chain or share it with the government entities or similar. One guys that are really like this is also a very cool example. They're up and coming startup distillery out of Ireland. Are using it, they're really building up everything by design to be as transparent as possible, to build those relationships within their supply chain, but also with outside stakeholders. Again, here you see IoT devices being included in. So you want to look at really kind of, and I'll move to my closing thoughts. You want to look to blockchain as a trust network. You got to realize it's not a silver bullet. You have to look for these types of technologies to be complemented with something like a decentralized knowledge graph if you want to handle this type of connected data. Don't be afraid of it. Global adoption is here. There's, it's enterprise grade. There's large companies already using it. Things are definitely already happening. So it's something that can be approached. And what kind of like the investment of time and effort to understand how can this have an implication for my industry, and including the events like we're having today, I think they are awesome, and I think it's going to lead to a lot more innovation in the space. And I know I'm 5 seconds over, but get your hands dirty. There you go. I'll find that. That's my last. That's my thought, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomas. Thank you for the great presentation. Our next speaker is Frank Fleming, who I'd like to introduce. He has a presentation about challenges and opportunities of implementing blockchain in seafood. Frank is a former commercial fisherman and is founder and CEO of Verifact. Verifact provides software solutions to the seafood industry, including a blockchain platform.
Hello, Philip, and thanks very much for the opportunity to present here. So I'll just make sure this is sharing okay. Is that okay now, Philip? Does that look okay?
We can see the PowerPoint screen. We don't see the full screen presentation.
You don't see the full screen?
No, I see your mouse is stuck on a loaders, and I see the PowerPoint application with implementing blockchain and seafood.
I'll just start again. Is that
now
okay?
We can see the kind of like the support tool for presentations, kind of like the screen that you should be seeing, but not the full screen presentation.
Oh, I'll just 1 second now.
You just need to click on display settings now.
Sorry now.
I think if you click play from the beginning,
yeah,
and
that's
then
what I've
at
done.
the top, when it comes up at the top, you should have a.
Yeah, so is there something I should click on the top now? No, sorry.
I think it says I still see PowerPoint. Maybe try to exit and restart it again.
Yeah, I will now. Sorry.
I'm not sure what's. Maybe try play from the beginning again.
I'll just try it this way, maybe a different way. Is that any better? Is that okay?
I still see the PowerPoint.
Display settings. Swap
Yeah,
present.
try display settings and then swap screen with
Is that
I'm
okay?
not sure. There we go. We can see it now.
Okay, super.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks. Apologies. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about this. So a little bit about Verifact. So we provide software and support services to the seafood industry is our core industry, but we do provide in other industries as well. We deliver sustainability, food safety and quality projects. As you mentioned, I was a commercial fisherman up till 2009, and then we built on that up to the tech part that we are today. So we do have a deep industry knowledge. In fact, our company runs fishery improvement projects. We run 8 of those projects, and we've helped other fleets achieve MSC certification. So we do have a deep knowledge of the sector and some of the challenges, and particularly around sustainability and proof around that. Our customers are producers, processors, retailers, and state bodies. And to deliver our services, we have a cloud-based infrastructure and a blockchain platform. We get asked quite a bit about what is blockchain, and many of your speakers have talked a little bit about this. It probably would be more accurate to say what is a distributed ledger, but blockchain is a subset of that. So I'm just going to simplify it, and I'm just going to show people. We'll say a traditional supply chain, think of it this way, it depends on labeling the product from one supply chain participant to another. So a traditional supply chain, you have the vessel that might go into a cooperating agent onto a processing plant, and this meets the legal requirements of one step up and one step down. And this works and it functions. But when you start to introduce blockchain technology, the difference is that the information, rather than being kept in a silo by each participant in the supply chain, comes to a central ledger and then can be shared back with other people. So quite simply, it's exactly as you see on the screen. So an example of how this works in practice could be that a fishing vessel lands product, puts it up on the pier, and maybe 2 or 3 steps up the chain, maybe there's a quality report done on that product that can now be shared easily back to the vessel, whereas before you couldn't see back to the vessel maybe who caught it. So immediately you can see the benefits of being able to share information through different supply chain participants, including bringing that to the consumer. And this is then what a system could evolve to. So a longer term goal, then you do start to integrate other data, not just the supply chain, but you start to take in what's captured by regulatory authorities, and then science can feed and take data from that as well. And we have practical examples of this. What's really important in terms of blockchain is that why do we need it? And you need a very clear value proposition for participants. You know, you can't ask fishermen to do more of something or the processing industry to do more unless there's a value in that. On the left-hand part of the slide, you can just see how traditional business, we'll say there's 4 different types of businesses listed in that graph. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you have the fishing industry who are maybe doing external certifications to prove they're doing the right thing, demonstrate sustainability. Above that, you might have companies that are developing new technology, implementing blockchain. So now they're starting to develop different digital ways of doing things. And on the right-hand side, you do have other emerging business models, such as disruptive ones, maybe plant-grown proteins. And finally, you might have something like Maui, who are using blockchain technology and telling the story at consumer level. So the point is, if you think about the wild capture seafood, it's competing in that landscape, and there needs to be a value proposition for people to say, is there a value in me doing this? On the right-hand side, then you can see the growth in the global sustainable debt annual issuance. So it's just a slide to show you the amount of capital that's going into different industries that you would need to prove green credentials and sustainability to get access to that. So think about our fishermen and the processing plants going forward, needing to access that green capital and needing to be able to prove what they do. So you need to think about that value proposition for people to be involved. So just a couple of case studies. We did a case study with Bordis Gawara, that's the Irish Seafood Development Agency. In 2019, we did a digitalization roadmap which set out the different steps you could do in terms of implementing distributed ledgers and blockchain technology. In 2020, we actually implemented pilots, and we rolled this out to more of the industry during 2021. So there was a pathway there to sort of learn what the industry wanted, implement the pilots, and then roll this out to industry in practical terms. The commercial outcomes of those pilots were we did supply chain validation in 3 retailers, and there's too short a time here to explain what different parts of the supply chain would like in blockchain, but we have a lot of work done in that area. So retailers are constantly asking for supply chain validation. So we did the project in 3 different retailers. We told the story then unpack for hake and farm salmon using QR codes. And a commercial outcome of that was one of the retailers, so it's a German retailer in this case, has now moved to 12 lines carrying fully integrated QR codes on their packaging. So here we are seeing evidence of a big retail chain working with the industry and practical solutions resulting in commercial decisions going forward. In 2022, we are doing a big project with a large seafood brand and actually some promotions on fresh fish counters using, again, blockchain technology. We also have underway a Scottish case study, so we're working with Fisheries Innovation Scotland. And very similarly, we did a digitalization roadmap end of 2020 and start of 2021. Then we did a short project which focused on identifying pilots, and now we've moved on from that, where we've started work on 2 full supply chains. One is in Wrapup industry, so it's from catching, processing right out to retail, and the other one is in a key whitefish species. So we're in the middle of identifying people to work with in those supply chains, but they're real practical examples. So just about the challenges and opportunities, even though the technology might make a lot of sense, taking data can be quite challenging. And that's even if a company wants to give you that data. People are busy. What kind of a system has the company? And you need to work out a way of taking data. So that's quite often a challenge, but it can be overcome. One of your earlier speakers said as well, you know, a system must be accessible for large and small players. So when you take that data, you might need to take it from a big company, so that might be automated, but you might need to take something from a small player, so it could be something simple like a portal, and we do both side parts of that. A solution.
I'd just like to give you a 2-minute warning.
Perfect. It's actually my last slide, Philip, so thanks. A solution must be low impact, non-invasive and adaptive. So to implement blockchain in seafood supply chains, it would be a wrong road to go down to say to companies that you need to have huge capital investment to make this all work. What you actually need to do is work out ways to take the data from existing systems and integrate it off-site, much like my earlier slide. So you need to take that data and worry about that integration in a company that can integrate it with the next part of the supply chain without companies having to spend a lot of money. So there are some of the challenges, and some of the opportunities is vastly improve supply chain validation. So you now have vision of where your product come from. Differentiation of seafood products is a really big one. So the catching sector wants to differentiate its products and want to say, look, can you buy my product? I'm a fisherman. You learn about me and choose my product. And lastly, the food safety benefits. So there are some of the opportunities. So that's it really from me, Philip.
Thanks a lot, Frank. That was a great presentation. Right now, we're going to move into a quick Q&A session for 15 to 20 minutes. So if you have any questions, could you please submit them into the Q&A section of the Zoom application? In the meantime, there is one question that was asked, and that is, what practical role can it play in the small-scale artisanal fishing fleet? And I think by it, they mean blockchain.
Will I take that, Philip?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes, it can play a huge role for the small fishing vessels. In fact, what's crucial about the adoption of blockchain, when you look at people who are adopting it globally, you will see big and often vertically integrated companies who can invest into this space because they have the money and the capital and the vision. But what you need to do is think about how small players can feed into that. And it's not that difficult. So you can have something simple like a portal where people can log on and put information in. And I think that it's very important that it's thought about going forward, how those players integrate rather than seeing big, large, well-capitalized companies move ahead and maybe leave behind the smaller people. But there's an opportunity to work with both as long as that integration is thought carefully about.
Thank you. Just while we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, I would like to present a question to Peter Olsen. In your studies of blockchain technologies, what did you find in terms of interoperability between various blockchains?
I would highlight interoperability as probably the biggest advantage of blockchain over traditional technologies, which are relational databases. But it's worth noticing that this advantage is mostly for actors downstream. They are the ones who have the biggest challenge in interoperability, in merging data. So if you're a retailer or if you're a consumer product producer, you have currently have lots of suppliers. And even if you ask the information to be submitted to you electronically using one of the many standards or proprietary solutions there are now, there is a really big problem of integrating the data. And that's part of the reason why consumers are not getting more information. So blockchain databases in their nature are more similar than, relational databases are simply, imagine them like Excel sheets. Someone has made some number of columns and giving them headings and some number of rows, and then you get sent them from 100 different suppliers, and you have to try and fit this into one database. This is the biggest single challenge now of data integration, and that's much simpler because blockchain databases are in their nature more similar than relational databases. So we have highlighted that in our report as the biggest driver for blockchain.
Thanks, Peter. It does. We have one question that's come in. I think that this question is targeted at Nicolas, and it says, what are the prospects of coupling blockchain with automatic image recognition and other AI capturing data at the source as a way to mitigate the problem of garbage in, garbage out?
Yes, thank you. I think there are quite some prospects. It's very much dependent on the IA systems, I guess, in the end, of what is like are these systems really able to capture? You have to consider that when a catch is like occurring, it's not only on board. There's like many steps on board of processing the catch, but also already in the water. Bycatch, for example, can occur, which slips off the net before the net actually comes even on the deck. And the question is how much of these catch processes or compartments or components of the catch an AI system can pick up actually. But I think we can expect to see quite some advances in identifying several fish species, for example, also getting an idea of the distribution of sizes and maybe weights of certain fish species that are like passing a conveyor belt, for example. And if IA is getting fast enough and precise enough to identify those as much as possible to the species level, or to at least some sort of like family level where you can identify flatfish versus roundfish or something, that helps probably to get more data and like fill gaps of observers at sea, which can only participate in a fraction of fishing trips that actually occur. And if fishing vessels are equipped with these kind of AI systems, they can complement or even like eventually maybe replace many of these observers at sea trips.
Thank you, Nicolas. We have one more question that's come in as well. So this question, I think, is just directed at the group of presenters. So please just raise your hand if you feel like you can answer this question. Can blockchain also complement or even replace seafood certifications such as MSC? Yes, why don't we start with Nicholas first, and then Peter and Thomas after.
I think in a way it can, because if you consider a product as some sort of asset that is handled in a blockchain, and I think like a crypto coin, it can be also treated by a blockchain. So I think there's definitely potential in giving the burden of proof to the producer or to the industry that something is produced sustainably and mostly sustainably in the way the consumer wants it to have.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I don't wish to start an argument with my other panel members, but no, it can't. The MSC certification happens in the real world. You have to make assessments of stock sustainability. You have to make assessments of impact on the seabed and so on. Blockchain, and I think many of the discussions here, I made this remark. We're talking about distributed digital traceability systems. We're not really talking about blockchain. So what blockchain can do is to protect the data once it has been stored. But blockchain is nothing more than a database. It doesn't have any magical properties. You need to do, I'm not doing an advertisement for MSC, but MSC certification happens in the real physical world. And blockchain can be used to store the data and make sure the data is not tampered with. And it can make sure that certificates are not reused. And it can, to some degree, prevent people who are not MSC certified from using MSC certification or for using MSC certification on products that shouldn't have MSC certification. It can help with all that, but it can only help once the data is recorded. And MSC certification is a lot more than recording data. It's actually doing stuff in the physical world.
So I have Tomas, I believe that you had a response for this as well.
Yeah, well, not particularly to the MSc certification, perhaps, as that's really not my deep domain expertise. But we do have we work intensively with our partners from British Standard Institution, which do deal in a lot of different standards and certification initiatives. And to echo the point mentioned before, it's I don't see it as a substitute. It's just an enhancement, right? So assurance industry as a whole can benefit from additional elements of trust being introduced, and perhaps the certification that currently takes place in one way can be enhanced or can be improved, either made better or optimized or in efficiency by having a component that allows you to carry out this part of that certification through a trusted data exchange, right, or trusted data flow, and just but creating that might be a way of optimizing, but it's not something like necessarily will rip and replace the entire assurance industry and just make it entirely obsolete. There's a lot of domain expertise and understanding that goes into creating a standard and creating a certification scheme that is just required. But the technology can help in a lot of ways.
Thanks, Tomas. And Frank, I believe you also have a comment for this question.
I did indeed, and some of it has been answered really, which is why I took my hand down. But absolutely, I mean, it can help us because the MSC standard or other standards do require a chain of custody to be in place, and digital solutions to improve that chain of custody can support better the product that comes from MSC certification. I mean, MSC in its own right absolutely looks at the biological side of the stock, and the technology isn't going to replace that, but it can improve the chain of custody element and where that product is from.
Thanks, Frank. We have time, I think, for one more question. So we have a question. If blockchain were to be made obligatory for seafood in the EU, to what extent would that prevent trading of IUU caught fish?
I mean, I can say a word if you like. I mean, if you have knowledge of what's being traded and bought and sold in the supply chain, and you can see the origin, that has very large implications for curbing IUU fishing. If you have vision in one system of what's bought in at retail level and the volumes, and you can see back to the catcher, well, that's a huge improvement in terms of, then that's a huge improvement on traditional systems. So it can be very, very helpful in that regard.
Thank you. Does any of the other... Yes, Peter.
Yeah, again, any distributed digital system can look in the entire chain. We have lots of systems that are not blockchain based, but when it comes to IUU fishing, there's one thing that blockchain can do probably better than any other system, and that is to prevent or significantly reduce the reusing of certificates. So say if you have some legal catch and you also have some IUU catch going to the same processor, it is currently not too difficult to reuse certificates, to sell a lot more fish and use the same certificates again and again. I won't go into that in detail, but there are lots of reports on that. And that is something that blockchain could certainly help with. So the data, when it would make it more difficult to reuse certificates. But this overview of the entire chain, that is something that is the property of any distributed traceability system, whether blockchain based or not.
Thank you. I think we have one more time for this last question here, and it seemed that this was a topic of interest. The MSC is a scheme that shows that the food is wild caught, sustainable and traceable. That's data. Why can we not use blockchain to verify it? Yes, Peter.
Any traceability system contains claims, not facts, not necessarily facts at all. That is also true for a blockchain system. So if you want to verify the data, that means that you want to check that the data is true, that there is a match between the true state of the world, for instance, the species you claim it is, or the owner you claim it is, or the gear type or something. And in general, a system cannot verify itself. You can have mechanisms for protecting. So maybe the short answer is that's not what blockchain is good at, protecting the data once it's in there, but it cannot ensure that the data is true unless you couple it to automatic data capture systems like we discussed previously with the image censoring and so on. But blockchain cannot verify itself. It cannot verify its own data. You need some other mechanism for that. But what it can ensure is that you know who entered the data. So if there is erroneous data, if there's faulty data, you know who made the recording, and you can also make sure that no one has overwritten it. It can't verify itself.
Thanks, Peter. Nicholas, I think you had a response as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think I totally agree with Peter, and I just wanted to say something to a previous comment, and I think the way that blockchain could facilitate certification is that the system of certifying could be like changed, or not the system, but the way certified schemes could be set up could be changed by like making people buy assets or parts of like some sort of quota of certification, and then that could be like processed through a blockchain. And I think that what Peter mentioned about reusing certificates, this kind of thing would be then less easy. So I think that's what I meant originally when I had in mind that this could facilitate the certification scheme.
Thank you for the clarification. At this point, we have a couple more questions, but I'd like to save those for our longer Q&A session at the end. Right now, we have a 10-minute coffee break. So why don't we take 10 minutes Everybody can get some coffee, bio breaks, and then we can meet back here and continue the panel.
Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Take care.
Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to give just one more minute while everybody's returning. All right, I think we can get started. I'd like to introduce Alessandra Felipe. She will give a message on behalf of the NWWAC. Alexandra is the vice chair of the NWWAC. She is Fisheries and Maritime Affairs Advisor for the NGO European Bureau for Conservation and Development. You're muted, Alessandra.
Voilà, merci beaucoup Philippe et bonjour à tous. Donc on est de retour de cette pause café qui, on l'espère, un jour sera un peu plus conviviale qu'être derrière notre écran chez nous au bureau. Donc c'est ma première intervention en capacité de vice-présidente du comité exécutif du Conseil consultatif des eaux occidentales septentrionales, et donc je suis très honorée de participer à ce webinaire en cette capacité. Je voulais d'abord remercier les intervenants précédents et les 3 secrétariats des conseils consultatifs pour cette excellente organisation. Et je voulais vraiment mettre en avant la qualité des interventions des intervenants précédents et de leur diversité, ce qui donne vraiment envie d'entendre la suite. Je crois qu'il est très important pour le Conseil consultatif des eaux occidentales et septentrionales de co-organiser ce webinaire. C'est très bien, je crois, qu'on puisse faire des événements en co-organisation avec les autres conseils consultatifs, car évidemment certains sujets sont transversaux et d'intérêt commun. Évidemment, la traçabilité est un de ces sujets et je crois qu'améliorer la traçabilité sera un des grands défis et est un des grands défis pour les secteurs de la pêche et de l'aquaculture pour les années à venir. On voit clairement dans l'agenda européen qu'on a mis l'accent sur la traçabilité, que ce soit dans la stratégie de la ferme à l'assiette qui sera, on l'espère aussi, de la mer à l'assiette, ou bien dans la révision du contrôle des pêches, mais ça a été déjà dit par les précédents intervenants. C'est à la fois une question de conservation de la ressource, de protection des consommateurs et de concurrence loyale pour nos opérateurs. Pour ce faire, je crois que nous avons besoin des moyens technologiques les plus développés pour assurer la traçabilité des produits de la pêche et de l'aquaculture tout au long de la chaîne de valeur. Pour ça, nous devons nous informer sur les différentes technologies à notre disposition, comme les blockchains ou une combinaison de ces technologies, comme on en a parlé précédemment. Et je crois que c'est très important, du coup, qu'on fasse ce séminaire aujourd'hui. La traçabilité, c'est vrai, c'est une question de contrôle et c'est fondamental, mais c'est aussi une opportunité pour les secteurs de la pêche et de l'aquaculture de valoriser leurs produits. Alors, on a eu beaucoup de présentations techniques et maintenant, je crois que nous entrons dans l'expérience sur les terrains, ce qui nous éclairera sûrement énormément. Donc, je ne vais pas être plus longue. Merci d'avance aux prochains intervenants pour leur présentation et je vous remercie.
I'd like to introduce first Patrick Murphy. He's the CEO of Irish South and West Fish Producers Organization.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks to the organizers of this event and information. A sharing webinar, I would call it. And there has been a lot of information shared here, and as an industry representative, good and bad. and happy and sad. And this is why one of the questions I asked earlier was put up. So just to introduce myself, I am the CEO of the Irish South and West. My name is Patrick Murphy, and we have a membership of 90 vessels in the southwest corner of Ireland, demersal, pelagic, inshore, and multi-purpose vessels from 7 meters upwards to 37 meters. I'm moving very quickly, and I do apologize to the interpreters for the speed of my West Cork accent and voice. So one of the reasons I was here asked to speak today is because I have a big interest in this, due to the lack of full traceability in my own life. I suffered greatly in my own business previous to taking up this role, representing fishermen in my organization. So I find this very interesting and something that needs to be discussed very, very carefully. We are a very regulated industry, and as such, some of the commentary where we're looking at how can we implement blockchain. So as Peter Nelson said, this is down to individual streams of data that is to be controlled by the different actors in the chain. So you implement your own data, and then that data is deemed to be secure to that individual actor that's putting that in, whether it being a fishing boat, being the first actor, whether then it is the retailer down the chain, or the co-op, or indeed the processor. So each individual person, in my view and my understanding of blockchain, gets to enter their data of the process, and that's secure to them. Then we know that the data is secure. So one of the comments earlier on is that we need to do this because we need to give trust to the consumer for the products that are being put on the shelf. And I just want to point out that fishing boats, as I said, are very regulated. So each day before they leave the port here, they have to call in to the authorities to let them know when they're leaving. They have systems on board the boats that track them where their movements are. They have an electronic logbook that has to be updated each and every night. And they also have to show each area in which they fish for and the fish that they're allowed to catch. So by using blockchain for us in our industry, we think this data should be married into the products that they're catching, so that when they come ashore, this can be secure and passed on to the next player or actor in the chain. And then they in turn fill in their data about the fish and the product and how it moves on. And that's where we see the value of blockchain, because it is a very regulated industry. And I think we're, as an industry, missing a trick by not incorporating blockchain. But this data for us should belong to the actor. It shouldn't be used for control purposes. This is about, for us, getting a better value by creating trust to the consumer. It's traced to them. They are the ones that are saying, where's this fish coming from? How do we know it's caught sustainably? Who's caught it? And has it been done under all the other regulations and laws that apply to the fishing industry, which I think are critically important to be able to pass on to the consumer. In return, however, as a spokesman for the industry, I'd like to coin this phrase: there is no such thing as a free lunch. We would be hoping that for vessels and participants in these programs would see a guaranteed return for what they're doing. If they're going to make sure that the consumer is going to get a premium product that is trustworthy, and as they say, says what it does on the tin, then they too should be looking for remuneration for this, and not just them, but all the other actors who participate in these schemes. So moving on to the third slide, the vessel perspective. So traceability is becoming a global desire from consumers, and this would also incorporate then seeing the products coming from other areas. We have a difference in Ireland of the way that we allocate our fish. We do so on a monthly basis, and each individual vessel gets a certain allocation in each species that they're allowed to catch in a specific area. And this is monitored very, very closely and vessels, as I said, are obligated to welcome on board, control and inspection at any time while they're in their operation. And they also have to give 4 hours notice before they can offload any of their catch on the pier side. So we would definitely welcome this, provided it's used for the purpose that we hope it will be intended for, which is to give confidence to the consumer on the marketplace. So trust in fisheries, trust in the product, and trust in those who are actually, to me, risking their lives to go to sea to do this job. It is extremely dangerous. So for us, this could be in other areas, and the other areas would be the likes of the carbon footprint, where we see where the products is caught, whether it can compete with products coming from the other side of the world. And for that, blockchain would be extremely important to show the difference between what is becoming a very critical issue around the globe now, which is carbon footprint, and the amount of carbon that is used for food and food production, or food and the catching of food in the world. So again, I just want to come back to one of the key points from our industry and what I have been asked to represent in my organization, is that this data should belong to the person who is filling in the blockchain. It is open to any participant in the blockchain, and if there's a PR code at the end, each individual contributor into each part of the blockchain, of course, is visual, but nobody can corrupt it. As Peter says, nobody should be able to interfere with this, and for that there's a code. But I just want to highlight this. Boats catch a lot of fish. If you're looking for a data stream for each individual product or part of a food product that's created, that's a lot of data. And for me, it is one thing to have an overall view of what's happening in our industry, and that is acceptable, and that will help with science. As I said, marrying with the other data streams that are on board the boats, where the fish is caught, the authorizations that the boats have, all this can be included in the blockchain for the individual vessel if needed. But for that data for me is finished when the fish is consumed. There's no requirement for to store this data. In our country, we see a lot of data centers going up, and this is going to be a huge problem moving forward for countries. If we keep storing every bit of data that's out there, and as you said, in one of the slides where the phone is attached to somebody's hand, this could become an issue going forward. So I'm welcoming any questions, and thanks very much. I will end on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Next, I would like to introduce Alf Goran Knudsen. I'm really sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly. He's the managing director of Kavore Fiskodrept, a salmon aquaculture farm in Norway. You're muted. We cannot hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, thank you. And it was the name was correct enough, so that's good enough for me. Thank you all, and thank you for a great webinar so far. I'm Alf Goran Knudsen, the CEO of Kvarøy and the Kvarøy Group, a family-owned farm in the north of Norway. So we farm salmon and have done that for 46 years. We are a small farm in Norwegian scale, but at the same time we have done a lot of job with marketing, and we have our own brand in the US with Kvarøy Arctic. And when it comes to blockchain, we've been working with it for 2 years now, trying to find a solution that could help us be more transparent. As a company, we have full control over the chain of production, from all the way from egg to the plate. So we have the possibility to share as much information as possible with the customers, and we have been working on that system, as I said, for 2 years now, trying to figure out how we can share the information as easy as possible. It's been a long and time-consuming process for us, but we are we're there. All that is needed now is a push from customers, and we are really seeing that throughout the COVID period, that customers are pushing for more traceability, more openness about production and how we produce the fish, and what ends up on their plate. Yeah, I think I will leave it there for the discussion afterwards.
Thank you, Alf. Next, I would like to introduce Angel Matamora Erago. He is the Chief CSR Officer of Nova Pesca Nova, a Spanish multinational company specialized in the fishing, farming, processing, and commercialization of seafood products. I think we are seeing the wrong screen and we cannot hear you, Angel.
Hola.
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 I think at the top, you can click a button for display settings and you can swap. There we go.
No.
Yes, we can see your screen and we can hear you.
¿Estáis viendo pantalla completa? Vale. Gracias al Market Advisory Council por la invitación y a Philippe por tu moderación a lo largo de toda la jornada. Voy a tratar de centrar la presentación fundamentalmente en los porqués y menos en el qué y en el cómo relacionado con el blockchain. Vamos a intentar explicar cómo engarzamos trazabilidad y cómo elegimos tecnología dentro de nuestra estrategia de actuación responsable y sostenibilidad. En Nueva Pesca Nova vivimos del mar, somos más de 10.000 personas en 19 países en ambos hemisferios, en hemisferio sur y norte. Somos una empresa integrada y trabajamos para ofrecer a los mercados productos nutritivos, saludables y sostenibles, pescando, cultivando, elaborando y vendiendo con nuestra marca Pescanova. Hemos desarrollado nuestro programa de sostenibilidad, Pescanova Blue, para dar respuesta de forma responsable a una sociedad que demanda más proteínas de origen marino, pero que al tiempo nos demanda más respeto al planeta y a las personas. Y como usuarios de recursos naturales limitados en nuestros procesos, nos hemos fijado, entre otros, dos objetivos muy concretos, como son que en 2025 el 100% de nuestras materias primas y productos sean trazables al 100% bajo el estándar GDST y que en 2030 el 100% de materias primas pesqueras y acuícolas puedan mostrar evidencias de origen sostenible. Y ello porque entendemos que que la sostenibilidad es el destino de un viaje, que es la actuación responsable, y ello porque la conservación de los recursos naturales y la generación de beneficio social y económico que resultan de una actuación responsable deben ser tanto para el provecho de las generaciones actuales como las futuras. Por lo tanto, somos conscientes de que siempre habrá algo más que hacer para alcanzar esa sostenibilidad. ¿Por qué trazabilidad? ¿Cómo se engancha la trazabilidad dentro de nuestra estrategia de actuación responsable y sostenibilidad? Hemos realizado nuestros ejercicios de materialidad, hemos identificado aquellos aspectos materiales prioritarios, entre los cuales está evidenciar trazabilidad, y percibimos que la trazabilidad en su visión extendida, más allá de la seguridad alimentaria, añadiéndole legalidad y evidencias de sostenibilidad, es una forma de trasladar de forma transparente a los mercados la actuación responsable de aquellos aspectos materiales clave para nuestro grupo. Pero también cuando participamos en organismos internacionales como Global Compact, del cual somos participantes, identificamos igualmente a través de nuestra firma de los principios para el océano sostenible que la sostenibilidad de los productos del mar es una de las 5 palancas, pero que conseguir la trazabilidad total de estos productos es una forma de llegar más rápidamente a esa sostenibilidad y de luchar también contra la pesca ilegal. Para hacer esto, ¿qué estamos haciendo? Pues básicamente lo primero de todo ha sido elegir un estándar dentro de este modelo. Y ese estándar es el del diálogo global para la sostenibilidad de productos del mar, de la GDST. ¿Por qué hemos elegido esto? Porque es coincidente con la visión que tenemos de trazabilidad. Nos exige el requerimiento con el cumplimiento legislativo, lo cual hacemos desde nuestros inicios hace más de 60 años, porque nos requiere seguridad alimentaria, que es la visión clásica de la trazabilidad, y porque añade evidencias de sostenibilidad, de lo que antes se hablaba de lo físico, de las solicitudes físicas de nuestros grupos de interés. Y hemos elegido entre las diferentes tecnologías disponibles una plataforma que es la IBM Food Trust, que es una plataforma de trazabilidad que lo que nos da esa interoperatividad, que nos da transparencia, que nos permite no solamente incorporar todos los requisitos que las administraciones y los mercados piden, pero también los documentos que avalan y que evidencian esa sostenibilidad o ese cumplimiento legal, ¿no? Hemos empezado a trabajar en esta nueva visión de la trazabilidad desde hace más de un año. Hemos probado en 2 de nuestros países con 2 barcos, 2 piscinas que funcionan, concretamente en Argentina y en Ecuador, y actualmente nos encontramos en el proceso de llevar a producción estos dos países, ¿no? Y hasta aquí mi pequeña presentación para luego dar paso a las preguntas.
Thank you very much, Angel. Next, I would like to introduce Britta Gallus. Britta is the head of corporate responsibility and transparency at Metro AG, a German multinational wholesale company.
Okay, hello and good afternoon. Can you see my screen and can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's great. Well, thanks first for the invitation and the possibility here to talk to you all. I would like to talk about traceability and Metro, and just go to my next slide. Okay, Metro is an international food wholesaler, and we are represented in 34 countries. We are doing 25.6 billion revenue, and with all in all 678 locations. We are a pure wholesale company, and I just try to go to my next slide. It is not working. Which slide are you seeing? So give me a second.
We're still seeing the slide, Metro at a glance.
With a nice revenue thing.
Yes.
Okay, so on the next slide, unfortunately, it's not moving. Okay, again, pure wholesaler and in many countries. What are our main customer groups? Main customer groups are hotels, restaurants, caterers, traders. So we are really in the business-to-business, a business-to-business company and represented in many countries. We started already years ago with our digital traceability solution. One reason was the fisheries control regulation, where traceability is a must. And we as a professional wholesaler, we have to provide our professional customers with a lot of information. And then some years ago, we said the only way we can do that is that we use a digital tool, a digital solution. And our approach is based on globally harmonized GS1 standards. For, let's say, as a unique product identifier, we are using GS1 barcode. And the technical backbone is EPCS. So we are not using blockchain. We are using, as always I say, it is an event digesting machine, and it's a GS1 standard we are using. We are currently working with two databases. So the one is ftrace, which belongs to GS1. ftrace is used by many retailers and many suppliers. And in addition, we do have our in-house solution, which is PEER. And because both systems are based on the same standards, on the same GS1 standards, the EPCRS, it is easy to connect them. So we in Metro, we are also, let's say, to receive the Metro data, the Metro-related data, which are in ftrace. And how does the system work? So our products are labeled, as I said, with a GS1 data bar. There are several options, but this is the best way. So when I talk about fish and seafood, we do have a specific barcode containing the lot number on the product. And the suppliers, they can choose to which database they upload and to send the information. They can use ftrace or they can use our in-house solution PEER. So all relevant data we would like to see and we would like to transmit to our customers are stored in ftrace or in PEER. And because of the labeling of the products with the GS1 barcode, our checkouts are able to read this barcode and to print the lot number on the invoice. So just in case something is happening, we do have the possibility to, for example, to do a targeted recall. In addition, and this was mentioned already now a couple of times, because customers are asking more and more for information and they want to know where products are coming from, our customers can scan the barcode and retrieve all the information which are uploaded from the suppliers in a database just by scanning the barcode. The solution we are using is in our company not only used for fish and seafood, it is also used for meat, for example, and we are now thinking about, let's say, more assortment. This is very much important when we choose a solution. It must work in several countries and it must work for many assortments. And GDST was already mentioned in the last presentation. The GDST is a standard. And we heard from previous discussions and previous contributions that it's very much important to, let's say, align on the key data elements we would like to exchange and on the critical tracking events. And the GDST is an international initiative where we are engaged in, and this is a standard with an international aligned, let's say, process and list of attributes, key data elements and critical tracking events. So this is very much important also for the future to implement traceability really aligned with the GDST, which is also in the future also our target. That was it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Britta. At this point, I'd like to move into our Q&A session where we can have some questions forwarded to our panelists. I'd like to kick off the Q&A with a question. Describe the process your company went through to implement the traceability solution. Were there any unexpected obstacles that came up during implementation?
Philip, should I start?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. So, well, at first I would like to mention how important it is to do a proper supplier onboarding. We rely and depend on the information we receive from the suppliers, from the producers. So let's say to do this supplier onboarding properly and to control also the data accuracy is of utmost importance. For that, we do have, let's say, several means. So for the supplier onboarding, we do have a team, and this is the same for ftrace or for PEER. We do have a team which is capable to speak several languages and which is able clearly to explain the solution. And we do have a variety of options to upload data. It depends on the maturity level of the producers or of the suppliers. So we need, let's say, an easy process for data upload, a good supplier onboarding, and it's so decisive to check the data quality and accuracy. because we heard it already, garbage in, garbage out. And, you know, technology is not that much helping here. We really have to also to control, and we need the commitment from the supply chain partners to deliver accurate data.
Thank you. And other panelists, as you wish to respond to the question, if you just raise your hand, I'll know, you know, who to. Patrick?
Yeah, this is new to us in the industry, and as I said, there is an awful onerous task on most vessel operators, not just to go out and catch fish, but they're targeting and under the strict quotas that they're under and the landing obligation, but then to pass this information back on. So the problems we had was to get that. So luckily we have outside actors that assist with that, and that was one of the previous panelists, Frank Fleming. So we're constantly working to try and improve as an industry to make sure that the customer can see that the products that they're getting are trustworthy, and that's the main thing. But we do need the other actors in the chain to also assist us, because there has to be a financial contribution back to the vessels and the boats to make this happen. Otherwise, you're just adding more regulations, more work onto vessels, and it'll break them. You know, it's just not possible to keep year on adding more and more obligations on these vessel owners and vessel operators without some return that they can pay for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And how?
Bueno, decir que quizás nosotros estamos en un paso anterior o que al que puede estar Metro o que puede estar nuestros colegas noruegos, pero diría que el primer paso que hemos tenido que dar es, o el primer aprendizaje es la definición de trazabilidad, que todos dentro de la compañía entendamos lo mismo por trazabilidad y cuál es su alcance, que superemos el concepto de trazabilidad de seguridad alimentaria, incorporándole todos aquellos requisitos del estándar que hemos adoptado, que es el de GDST, que incorpora legalidad y evidencias de sostenibilidad, como antes señalaba. El siguiente punto es identificar dónde están los datos, ¿no? Y sus evidencias. Y en cuarto lugar diría que la clave es que la captura y la transmisión de la información se automatice para hacer cada vez más robusto la información y que el dato sea fiable. Y ello por añadidura si la elección es blockchain, porque evidentemente exige 100% de disciplina y de rigor, porque si no tendremos que tratar nuestros propios errores. Dicho esto, evidentemente la dificultad de la producción pesquera es grande y captar los datos en un barco o captar los datos en una granja no es una tarea fácil.
Thank you, Angel. Alf Jordan?
Yes, no, for us, it's we were one of the first movers regarding this, and that, of course, is very, first of all, it's very expensive and it's a very time-consuming process to be implementing all of this. We did not do a well enough onboarding of all the external data sources. We have been struggling a bit to get everything connected, and realized there's no easy fix on this. It is a long way to go, and we need to onboard all the systems in a good way. First step easy, and then add on going forward. We took in too much maybe and tried to have too much data from the start, and ended up going back 2 steps, making it a bit easier.
Thank you, Alf Jordan. Another question. Another question that we have is, do your suppliers and customers use different traceability systems? How easy or difficult is it to share data across different solutions?
Yeah, I can start here. As I said already, so there is a different maturity level on supplier side. So you know, we are really offering different possibilities from a manual data upload or the other possibility would be an XML half automated upload, and let's say the most matured one is the machine-to-machine communication. I think there are several possibilities, and we try to adjust it to the capabilities of the suppliers, and to make it as easy as possible that the data upload and the connection of systems is happening and working. Yeah.
Alf, you want
Yeah, the supplier part of it wasn't hard. The data is there; it's possible to transfer. It was compliance with everything, and we have other customers that use other systems like Whole Foods Market in the US use Trace Register, but all of these systems are manual punching all the data into the system from our side, and then the processors and use that data that we have to manually push in. So it's there's nothing. What we wanted was a fully automatic data system that transfer the data without any manual input.
Thank you. Angel?
Sí, construyo sobre lo que acaba de decir Alf Goran, de la importancia de la captura del dato automatizado lo más posible, pero vuelvo a insistir en la importancia de empezar de abajo arriba, por los cimientos. Los cimientos es la estandarización de la información que se nos pida, que todos hablemos, que todos entendamos lo mismo por trazabilidad. Segundo, que todos hablemos el mismo lenguaje, y eso significa utilizar el estándar de comunicaciones GS1, significa utilizar la misma tecnología electrónica de transmisión de datos y poder hablarnos entre nosotros porque sabemos el mismo idioma. Corremos el riesgo de empezar por arriba, por la tecnología. El debate de hoy comienza por blockchain. Yo creo que el debate de hoy no debe comenzar por blockchain. El debate de hoy debe comenzar a partir de qué entendemos, qué entiende el sector por trazabilidad, cuáles son los requisitos que se nos pide alrededor de la trazabilidad. ¿Existe un estándar, digamos, globalmente aceptado que nos puede guiar para llegar a la trazabilidad? Bien, estamos aquí, todos estamos convencidos de ello, elijamos ahora la tecnología y que la tecnología no sea una barrera, que no sea una barrera de acceso a los mercados y que no sea algo que deje a nadie fuera. Esto tiene que ser inclusivo. Por lo tanto, tiene que ser algo que puedan hacer desde un pescador artesanal a una flota semi-industrial o una flota industrial y al menor coste posible. Porque, como bien decía Patrick Murphy hace un rato, que nos ha dado un baño de realidad a todos los que estamos aquí, el trabajo a bordo de los barcos es un trabajo complejo. Captar esa información es complicada y los requisitos que tienen todos los barcos en cualquier o en casi todos los lugares del mundo son muchos para poder desembarcar. Empecemos la casa por el cimiento, por los cimientos y no por los tejados. Y empezar por el tejado es empezar hablando de tecnología, cuando lo que tenemos que hablar es de trazabilidad como concepto, estandarización y luego vendrá la tecnología.
Thank you, Angel. Next, Patrick Murphy.
Yeah, look, I'd like to echo what Angela said in his commentary. We're here to discuss blockchain, and as Peter also described, this is about information and who inputs the information to make sure that in blockchain that this information put in by that person is secure. It's not about sharing the information with somebody else unless you're going to get them to program that in and have a specific code to you that makes it secure. So if we're talking about traceability, it's a different concept to what I believe was the question that was asked there about sharing the data. So blockchain for me, is about a sealed component of information with an identification number that is specific to the person that inputs that data. And then the next actor in the chain, which is, say, the processor, has their own module or their own area where they put in that data specific to them that nobody else can corrupt or change or contaminate. So that's the understanding I have of blockchain. The question that was asked there is slightly different if we're going looking for traceability. And as I said, we have vessels that have a massive amount of regulations to comply with to remain legal on the waters. And I always find it a little bit disturbing when people say, well, we don't know what the boats are doing. They are monitored 24/7. They know exactly where they are at all times. They can watch and track the speed of the vessels and their activity. And as I said, they can be boarded at any one time. You can use that data stream that's already present if you wanted to build it into a blockchain, because these boats are doing it. We need to put trust back into the consumer to know that where they're getting the fish from is being caught sustainably, it is being caught under MSY rules, and that the countries are abiding by the quotas that they're given. This information is there. We just need to share it. My concern is that this information is used for that principle, for that purpose, which is to create trust for the consumers. In return, they must understand that there's a cost to this and that there must be a premium for this if this product is what they're looking for, because that's what it means for the person who's operating outside there. The margins are tight enough and it's hard enough for people to make livings in the water as it is, and make sure that there's sustainability of stocks. It all marries together. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for that thoughtful response, for those thoughtful responses. The next question that I have is, how do you see the use of these traceability technologies and blockchain in small artisanal fleets? Yes, Patrick? I was an inshore fisherman for 30 years of my life before I took up this role, and it's an extremely difficult industry to be a part of. And I can see the same requirements for these vessel operators and inshore operators as a larger boat. If again they need to share the data and it's to be done through blockchain, then they have to have a portal where they can input that data and that it's secure and nobody contaminate with it. And then in return for that, you have full traceability back to the vessel, where it's operating, the different data that they will insert into it. It's no different to the vessel size, but it comes back to this. It's down to the return to the vessel and the operator again, whether it's worth it, whether they can do it, and whether it's financially viable to do it, and then who they sell onto. Will they participate in the same thing? Will they see it as well too? And this is what needs to be understood. There is a cost to this, and it has to be, for me, a return to the people who are participating in this. How you get there is as important as the technology and the data that we use. Thanks again for allowing me. Thank you, Patrick. Do we have anybody else who'd like to respond to the question? Again, the question is are these technologies such as is traceability and blockchain, how can this be implemented in small artisanal fisheries? Is it possible to implement it there? Is it feasible?
Bueno, puedo dar nuestra opinión. Yo creo que va a requerir apoyo a la digitalización, tratar de apoyar la búsqueda de soluciones que puedan ser utilizadas por la pesca artesanal. Yo creo que va a ser necesario establecer incentivos para que haya una adopción de esa tecnología, y luego se va a requerir de tiempo. Yo creo que, como casi siempre, tiempo, recursos y dinero, ¿no? Por lo tanto, yo creo que apoyo a la digitalización y apoyo a desarrollar tecnología de fácil uso que pueda llegar a los pequeños barcos artesanales pesqueros o incluso a grandes barcos que hoy no tienen esa posibilidad de digitalizar, que tendrán que incorporar incentivos y tiempo.
Thank you, Angel. Yes, Nada.
Yes, yeah, thanks a lot, Philip. And I would like to join Angel in his mention of incentives. Sorry, I know of some blockchain projects or initiatives that had worked precisely because they had some kind of vouchers or tokens to the small small producers or fishermen. So they are on board on blockchain applications. So the fishermen will see the incentive and then they will join the projects. Otherwise, it will not work. So that's an important aspect there. And I joined Angel another time. Another thing that we need to take into account that came into the discussion of the first panel is whatever happens in the business sphere or realm, there it has to be accompanied for, if it is to be upscaled, there has to be a legal framework or a state of readiness of a whole country to adopt IT or digital solutions. So we're back to regulatory frameworks, legal aspects to feature or to ensure an effective upscale. It does not apply to all countries, I would say, and blockchain, once again, is only one solution. It could or could not work at a big scale, say if the state of readiness that does not check all the boxes there. That's all I got to say. And yes, so there are projects out there, and it's not the only solution. If it is, there are lots of things to think about before adopting it. And thanks a lot, Philip.
Thank you very much for that response. We have one question, and I apologize because I don't speak Spanish, only English and Portuguese. So I had to translate this. But let me ask this question. If artisanal fisheries cannot access these systems, the end result will be that industrial fleets will have a competitive advantage over small-scale fisheries. This is already happening with MSC. Could this not lead to the exclusion of artisan products in a large part of the European market? Yes, Patrick?
Yeah, thanks. Again, from my comments earlier, it's not expensive per se to upload data into a portal. What would be the return is to the person and down along the chain to make sure that there's a certain premium for this. Otherwise, we're not talking about creating trust in the consumer. We're speaking, as the previous speaker, this is going to become regulatory, and that's a whole different conversation as far as I'm concerned, because we see. Just to give an example, we have vessels that if the IT system on board the vessel isn't working, they cannot leave the port until it's corrected and made work. So that opens up a whole different conversation if we're talking about making this regulatory or as a control measure. This to me is about creating trust where we believe trust has failed, because my understanding is that the consumer is looking for this. So I don't see a problem if the supports are put there to help people to create the portals and set up the infrastructure for this. Then it's only a matter of putting in the data. And again, if it's blockchain, then it comes down to the individual user who will have a specific code for themselves in that blockchain that will be unique to them, that their data then is secure to them, and it's not contaminated or can be contaminated by anybody else. As Peter, I come back to the previous speaker, pointed out at the start of this. That's my understanding of it. But from an industry's point of view, we are a very regularized industry. If this is about creating more regularization and more control measures, and that have to be complied with, it's moving away completely to what the industry is looking for, which is to put trust into the consumers' minds that the fish is caught sustainably and correctly and under the regulations that are there. And for this, they can trust in the product and they can pay a premium for it, which then incentivizes everybody rather than a regulatory way of complying. Because if you're in the club and you're getting more money for your product that's in blockchain, this to me is the carrot and not the stick. Thanks again.
Thank you, Patrick. And how?
Bueno, yo creo que lo he dicho antes ya. Cualquier herramienta que pueda estar al servicio de la trazabilidad, sea blockchain o sea otra, tiene que ser inclusiva, tiene que facilitar el acceso a todos aquellos operadores que que actúen responsablemente en el mundo pesquero o en el mundo del cultivo, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, sé de algunas iniciativas en diferentes países, me viene a la cabeza Perú, pero también me viene Sudáfrica, de pequeños desarrollos tecnológicos a partir de teléfonos móviles donde se puede subir esa información y trasladar al siguiente eslabón de la cadena de valor, ¿no? Creo que esto no puede convertirse en una barrera de entrada a ningún mercado. Tiene que ser una herramienta al servicio, como decía Patrick, de la diferenciación de la pesca, de aquellos que hacen las cosas de forma responsable, de aquellos que no lo hacen. Y no puede venir identificada por un coste excesivo que no se puede abordar. Pero me consta que hay iniciativas a bajo coste favorecidas en códigos abiertos de tecnología. Yo no soy tecnólogo, pero me consta que existen, que cada vez hay más tecnología a bajo coste a través de teléfonos que permiten acceder a estos sistemas o estas plataformas que son abiertas y donde el coste no debe ser excesivo, pero sí debe ayudar a esos operadores, organizaciones de productores que hacen las cosas responsables a diferenciarse.
Thank you, Angel. I would also like to iterate or just speak a comment from Basilio Otero. He says the artisanal fleet is integrated into fishermen's associations in Spain or in POs in the rest of Europe, and through these organizations it can be implemented. In addition, in Galicia, there are ATMs that can be used with this technology. I'd like to move on to our next question, and that question is, what could regulatory institutions, including the European Commission and EU member states and multi-stakeholder groups such as the advisory councils, do to help further the transmission of traceability information and other data, as well as to further related technologies? Yes, Britta?
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Yeah, so we just raised already the fisheries control regulation, and we know that this is under revision. And as I said, the current status is it's just talking about traceability and asking for lot traceability. And how to assure this traceability, let's say with all the relevant data, is up to the different stakeholders. And to be honest, it is not easy, right? As a wholesaler, we are, well, as I said, we are, let's say, close to the to the end, to the customer of the supply chain to get all the data. And my hope would be if there is a rule based in the new fisheries control regulation saying it is about digital traceability, which should be established, that would help the whole supply chain. So I would support the Commission's proposal as it is to implement or the rule to have digital traceability in place. I am sure that there will be always several solutions. There will be blockchain-based solutions, other solutions, EPCIS, so there will be different solutions in place. But the general, and we have to assure interoperability and that the data we exchange, that we have a clear understanding, a common understanding about the key data elements. But I think this should be led to the companies and to the supply chain. But the general rule, digital traceability, I think that would help a lot. And I can only support what has been said to say, well, it needs time, it needs support and patience. But I'm sure that we can then establish a good, let's say, flow of data in the supply chain.
Yes, I'll just take it, Philip. It's correct. There's going to be a lot of solutions, and standardizing the data or standardizing how it's done, it's important. But at the same time, we have to be careful not to exclude any technology or exclude any producers. There has to be, like Patrick said, some kind of carrot for those that want to do this, and it is for the seafood industry and also for especially for aquaculture. It's really needed. There's too much fish being sold generically, like standard salmon, and salmon especially is labeled as salmon and not even as Norwegian or Scottish or whatever in the world. So they need some kind of solution that gives a traceability for it. But the difficult part is not making it mandatory, but giving a carrot to encourage people to implement systems. Even we're a small farmer, and we were, like I said, one of the first movers, and it's time consuming and costly. So it needs to find better ways of implementing it.
Thank you. Angel? You are muted, Angel. We cannot hear you. I think you're muted in Zoom.
Sí, decía que Alf, Goran y Britta han dicho parte de mis ideas. Creo que es importante definiciones claras y precisas de trazabilidad por parte de las administraciones, que pidan lo que es posible, no lo que no es posible. Buscar la estandarización, construir en aquello que funciona y que existe, independientemente de donde esté. Y ahora mismo hablo del estándar de GDST. Si existe un estándar y es un estándar que puede ser global y que funcione, no reinventar. Y luego creo que se van a necesitar, como antes decía, incentivos, apoyo a la digitalización para facilitar la captura del dato, que sea inclusivo y que existan esos incentivos, ¿no? Y luego tiempo, paciencia, porque esto no se resuelve en un minuto, requiere tiempo porque requiere inversión en la mayoría de los casos.
Thank you. And Patrick?
Yeah, I echo the previous two speakers, and look, if you do encourage people to be good actors, then it's in their best interest to continue that. As I said in my introduction, I'm the CEO of the Irish South and West, but I've been a producer since I left school from the age of 18, and I earned my own trust. And to do so, I welcome these initiatives. but not if they're forced upon me, because they can put you out of business, and then you're in trouble. And instead of incentivizing compliance, you're pushing people to the other way. And this is the realities of what it is now, and it's getting tighter. And just to explain this to the people that are participating, when I started off as a youngster working in the shop at the age of 12, my father came in and he was in a good job, and over 30% of his income went on food. That is no longer the case. The disposable income has gone up. So the food producers are expected to do an awful lot more with less. So if you make it regulatory and force people into this, then you're going to cause problems. People want this. Our industry want this. They want to show that they are good producers and they are wanting to do the right thing, provided it pays. And if the European Union wants to encourage and help us to do this, that's where we start. And it's not just the producers, it's everybody along the blockchain. Everybody has to make a profit. It has to be viable for all the actors. Everybody has to be brought together in this. And it is applaudable that we're doing this because there's a need for it. And if the consumer wants to see this, the technology is there. And I apologize for the pronunciation of the name. I said Angel Angle. It's what he said. You know, this is what we need to do moving forward. We need to support, we need to take our time with this, and we need to get it right. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you, everybody, for your responses to the question. The next question that we have is, what made you decide to go with a blockchain solution rather than a more traditional technology? What were the main costs and benefits that you considered for your decision? Alpha, you want?
No, for me, it was what I talked about in the beginning here, having a full automatic system. Today, the system we have today, where you're manually inputting some of the data, is not trustworthy. So for us, it's as a farmer, we have all of this information. We share all of that information, but having a system where we don't need, there's no way of manipulating the data coming out is important, and manually you can do that. So that was the most important reason why we choose to go on with this.
Patrick?
Yeah, for us, this is just the beginning. It's in an infancy, and to be honest with you, we use an outside person, and that is one of the previous speakers in the previous panels that works with the boats, because this is something that vessel owners want to embrace, but they want to make sure that it isn't, as I said, the stick, it is the carrot, and it's slowly being incorporated. But if they see that this is going to be used in a different manner, then they will shy away from it. There's no doubts in that. But so why are we looking at this? We're looking at all data streams, different ways, FIPS and everything else. The fishermen want to get a proper return for the produce, and whatever they need to do to get that, they do it. They are trying to comply with very, very regulatory industry that they're working within, and they're just trying to make a living. When I ask my fishermen what are the two priorities for them as fishermen, the first one is to go out and come back safely with their crew. Number two is to make enough money to be able to do it again. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response, Patrick. And Hal?
Aunque pueda parecer incoherente lo que vaya a contestar, porque hemos optado por la plataforma IFT de IBM que aporta blockchain, yo creo que no es la única tecnología en este momento capaz de interoperar, transmitir información de forma segura y con un lenguaje común. Yo creo que cada compañía, cada empresa, cada productor, cada cultivador debe ser capaz de elegir la mejor solución en el mercado en cada momento. Blockchain, con lo que lo diferencia es la inmutabilidad del dato, es la capacidad que tiene de que los datos se encriptan, se registran y por lo tanto tienes que trazar tus errores y la corrección de tus errores. Es como quien prepara un pastel y finalmente le pone una guinda. Hay otras tecnologías que pueden hacer lo mismo, por lo tanto nadie puede imponer una tecnología a los mercados. Cada uno libremente tendrá que elegir aquella que funcione mejor. Si considera que la inmutabilidad le aporta un elemento diferencial, que la elija. Nosotros hemos hecho una llamada pública para que nos acompañasen diferentes tecnologías. 2 eran blockchains, otros 2 no lo fueron. El coste no fue lo que nos animó a decidir. No eran los más caros, no eran los más baratos. Hemos elegido la que consideramos que en este momento nos aporta una solución razonable. Ello significa que tengamos que con todos nuestros clientes utilizar blockchain. Es probable que no. Habrá con clientes que tendremos que transmitir nuestra información a través de GS1, a través del lenguaje común de transmisión electrónica de datos que llevamos utilizando en los últimos 20 años.
Thank you very much for your response, Angel. As for, I think we have time for one more question. And that question would be, what were the key learnings from implementing traceability in your businesses? Yes, Patrick.
For us, it's again, we're just starting off in its infancy, but we know that it's a requirement moving forward. The consumers are looking for not just about sustainability, but there is an awful lot more information. We have the Single-Use Plastics Directive, for instance, with the manufacturing, the circular economy for fishing nets, and that. So we're learning as we go, and we're participants. And the fishing industry right across Europe are participants. We have plenty webinars and seminars of all interlocking and interchangeable practices that are happening as we move forward. And we have to take them on board. We have to welcome them. But there has to be, I keep coming back to this, there has to be a return to the producers, the processors, the co-ops, the retailers. The consumer has to understand that there is a price that they will have to pay if they want this. It just cannot be done if there isn't remuneration for this, because we won't be able to afford it. And food prices have to reflect this. And that's what we learned. There is a cost to all this, and somebody has to meet that cost. It can't keep falling on the same balance sheet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we don't have any more panelists who wish to respond, I'd like to, oh, and how?
No, quizás el aprendizaje de este año trabajando en trazabilidad es que las compañías requeriremos mucho más rigor, mucha más disciplina, porque los mercados nos van a pedir que la información sea la correcta siempre y no poder fallar. Hasta ahora muchas veces ha primado la agilidad, la capacidad de respuesta, sobre la base de que tus procesos son robustos y referido a la seguridad alimentaria estás cubierto. Si tú quieres añadirle al concepto de trazabilidad más características, más atributos, requieres que tus procesos sean 100% robustos, 100% fiables y que la disciplina a lo largo del proceso sea 100%, que se cumpla al 100%, porque si no pierdes la traza y si pierdes la traza pierdes la confianza.
I couldn't agree more on how. Thank you, everybody, for your thoughtful responses to the questions. At this point, I'd like to, that's all the questions that we have for this panel. So at this point, I would like to ask if all the panelists could turn your cameras on for a quick kind of screenshot for Twitter.
Philip, sorry, I can't turn my camera on. It's blocked by the host.
Jacques, could you help us out?
Could the speakers repeat and just say a word?
It's Nicolas Prost.
Yeah, my camera is blocked by the host.
Nicolas. Apparently, you should be able to turn it on now.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, I changed in the meantime the device. I'm now with my mobile.
All right. Let's see. Okay, so we've gotten a picture taken. Thank you, everybody, for turning your cameras on. At this point, let me see if I can find my document helping me through this. I would like to introduce Gus Pastor, who's going to conclude this with a message. Gus is the chair of the MAC. He's also the chair of the AIPC, the European Federation of Fish Processors and Importers. He's the chair of the General Assembly of the NSAC and the North Atlantic Seafood Dorm. He is also the chair of the Dutch Fish Federation and the Interbranch Organization for Brown Shrimp Fisheries, and the vice chair of the Dutch Fish Marketing Board.
Thank you very much, Philip. Yes, well, this is that's a nice task to conclude an afternoon like this one. It's been a long afternoon, so I'm trying to be short, but I think it's been a rewarding afternoon because today's webinar has really provided us with an overwhelming amount of information. And to keep in the right termination, I would say we certainly should not block nor chain this information, but we should digest it. And I think we've heard in the 3 different parts of the webinar different ways to look at this. We've heard, of course, the views from the policymakers, from the experts, and from the stakeholders. And the common denominator seems to be pretty obvious. It's the joint wish to work on the best possible traceability of seafood. I think all have expressed that same need and wish. So that's really a strong starting point. Policymakers, of course, have their own ideas, and they want this mainly to ensure that products would be in line with their regulations. The experts, they would like to provide the know-how and the tools. And the stakeholders, they want this to demonstrate compliance with legislation and industry standards. And all of this should end in the best possible guarantee for consumer confidence in our seafood. That's the easy conclusion. Now, looking at the debate we had and the different presentations we've heard today, we've seen many different elements. First, I think what we've learned, and it was often quite sometimes now, that we must be clear on the fact that blockchain is an instrument. It's not a goal as such. It's a database. The goal is full traceability, and it can be achieved in different manners dependent on the specific situation. And the question was raised, I think rightly so, do we speak the same language when we're talking about traceability? Several elements were mentioned. Some were looking at sustainability elements. Others were looking at added value for the operators. Others were talking about legal requirements. Also food safety was mentioned, and maybe some other elements. So there are different ways to look at traceability, and blockchain would be an instrument to combine all these different elements. But then also we need to think that there's no such thing as one seafood value chain. There are numerous value chains. And it's pretty sure that we can see that it's not a matter of a one size fits all. It's a tailor-made application, was pretty clear from the different presentations we heard. And per value chain, you need to assess what the needs are and how then you would implement the instruments. And in this debate, specific attention was asked for the small-scale artisanal fisheries. What are the incentives for the operators to cooperate? Is there a willingness to provide all these data? And the question was also, do we need a legal requirement for digital traceability? It was mentioned as a good start. Or do we need economic incentives from the market? These are quite different ways to look at it. It's also pretty clear from what we heard from the experts that technically a lot is possible. There are many different instruments. They've been developed, they've been tested. Blockchain is being applied in different sectors. That probably is not the biggest discussion. But the other element which came up in the discussion many times was that it requires the right data to get to the right result. And are we in a position where we can provide those data? Is there a willingness for people to give these data? Most likely, it would require some party in a value chain to take the lead. I think we've seen some examples of that. In some cases, it's at the beginning of the chain. In many other cases, it's at the end of the chain. And most likely, I would say, integrated companies would have an advantage because they can work within their own company on data, where others would have to work with different stakeholders. Blockchain is all about trust networks without central authority. I like that phrase. I think that was a very good phrase. But the question is, are we directing it at consumers or are we directing it at authorities? This discussion remains to come back. We've heard many positive ratings on blockchain. We've also heard some critical comments about what you can and cannot expect from blockchain. It's not the silver bullet. So it's very, very interesting debate, which is clearly not finalized today. And I think we have a long way to go in a number of these debates. And for that, a workshop report will be made with a summary of all the presentations and the debate we had today. And this then will be the working document that the different ACs can use in their discussion with their different members. So on behalf of the North Sea AC, the Market Advisory AC and the Northwest Waters AC, I would very much like to thank all the speakers, the participants, and of course the organizers. And we really hope that this webinar has contributed to a better understanding of blockchain and other technologies for traceability, and that we can use that for further discussion in our ACs. So thank you very much, and have a safe and nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Thank you. Bye.